just would like to welcome everyone to our Live Well, Stay Healthy Wellness webinar series brought to you by the Family and Community Health Sciences Department of Rutgers Cooperative Extension. My name is Rachel Tansey, and I will serve as your host today. I'm located down here in Monmouth County as part of the FCHS department, and I'm very excited to be able to host this presentation of sensational soups today, certainly a topic we can all benefit from in these colder months. So now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our presenter, Joanne Kinsey. Joanne is a family and community health sciences educator with Rutgers Cooperative Extension down in Atlantic and Ocean counties, funded through the New Jersey Agriculture Experiment Station. So without further ado, let's get started.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this presentation today. Here in New Jersey right now, it's a little chilly. Well, it's, I think, a lot chilly and very windy. So it really could be a very good soup day, right? So let's start by talking about just what is soup. I mean, we know what it is. It's been part of our lives forever, but what is it really all about? And it was kind of interesting to look this up and see, what it's considered in a dictionary and in Wikipedia. So could be a hot or cold liquid, right? And we know that there are some very nice summer soups that are like gazpacho is very refreshing, but it's all cold ingredients, or it could be hot ingredients. It could have meat, it could have vegetables, it could have stock, water. I mean, you can see there, according to Wikipedia. And I think what's important to mention there is that most of the time the ingredients are brought to boiling in a pot until the flavors are all gelled together. So that's really, I think, an important thing to know. So let's look at what Merriam-Webster has to say. A liquid with meat, fish, or vegetable stock is a base, often containing pieces of solid food. So again, we know we could have solid food or not. We could have a broth. We could have something that's totally pureed that doesn't seem to have any solid food in it, but maybe did have solid food in it when we began cooking it. So lots of options here. I like the Food Network, and probably lots of you do too. So I was looking for, what are we talking about? Is it comfort food? Because it's very often considered a comfort food, and you can see why. It helps you to boost levels of serotonin in your body, which is helps you have a calming effect. And it may be good for depression for those same reasons. It could be the vitamins that are in the soup that are good for depression, like vitamin B and C, because they help with like calming your mood and helping you to keep from being anxious. So it's those foods that are in soup too, of course, they contain the nutrients that help you to feel calm. And maybe, like those typical tomato, carrot, potato, maybe some kind of grain that are calming for you. So we have one more here. So they're also saying on this website that soup may have something to do with that full, satisfied feeling, which is interesting too, right? It makes us feel full and comfortable. And I like how they talk about that when they're cooked in a broth, it's much easier digested by your body. And, there's a lot of, I don't know if we can say research around it, but people believe that their body feels better and that they're fighting infection better and illness when they're having this hot, comforting soup. I also think about tea in that respect too. If you have a bad cold and you have hot tea and you kind of hold that mug like right under your nose, if your sinuses are really congested, that kind of steamy feeling feels really good, helps you to feel a little bit better. So why do people like soup? All kinds of reasons, but for the most part, it reminds them of something in their past, their family, because soup is available in like every culture. And so it's a cultural thing. So we think back to our childhood, how we were raised, and maybe some family traditions through our culture that make us feel comfortable when we have something that we recognize that we've had before, that has made us feel good before. We remember a family member making this soup when we were a kid, or adding ingredients. Maybe you even helped to prepare a soup when you were a child, and that's very common, that we help the kids to get them involved, and that's how they remember these kinds of things. Soup is very much associated with warmth, but let's not forget that soup provides a lot of nourishment. So most soups have in their base maybe lots of vegetables cooked in, celery, carrots, onion, which is really a common base, that are cooked in and that have nutrients that very often are water soluble. That means the nutrients cook into the liquid. So that's where we get the nourishment part of our soup, because our nutrients get cooked into that liquid and they stay there, and then we consume them and they're healthy and satisfying for us. So if I were to ask you, what is your favorite soup recipe? You might be thinking about that, but where do you get your favorite recipes? Is this something that was passed down through generations in your family, or maybe from a good friend? Or maybe you're like me and have cookbooks that you love to look at and go back and flip through. Or today we like to go online and search and see, who's creating what kinds of soups. So lots of times we start with that recipe, or we start with part of a recipe and then we create our own, right? That's actually kind of my favorite way to go, is to have some basic idea and then think, but what do I really have on hand to make the soup what I want it to be? Sometimes people start the soup creation recipe on their own, totally, 100%. If you are a very confident cook, and know you have lots of great ingredients on hand, maybe fresh vegetables, maybe frozen, maybe canned vegetables, maybe some kind of grains in your cabinet like rice or pasta. Maybe you have fresh tomatoes growing in your garden and fresh herbs, and you can easily put together a soup that could be very, very satisfying. Could be even your best soup ever, if you create it yourself. The tricky part is there remembering what you put into that recipe, so that when people say, wow, that was really great, hopefully you jot it down and you can go back and remember what you did so you can do it again. Maybe soup for you is using a pre-packaged product. It could be canned, or a frozen soup, or a fresh soup from a restaurant, a takeout, or even from a supermarket today. So your version of soup and my version may be different. They're all different. Everybody's is a different idea, but we can kind of all work together with that and remake a packaged soup and kind of amp it up a little bit with our own ingredients if we want to, or some leftovers. So let's kind of be creative with this and think about how we can make our soup our best soup yet. Now, one of my favorite things to talk about is making your own stock or broth out of vegetables. You can also, you can make it strictly out of just vegetables, which I like to do that because sometimes if I have a friend over that's a vegetarian, I wouldn't want to be giving them a chicken stock in a soup or something like that. But I also save some bones from chickens that I've cooked and have that for stock too. Sometimes I combine them together and I have a chicken veggie stock that I create. But the fun thing about making your own stock is that it's so easy and there's basically no additional cost to it. So you don't need to go out and buy a stock in the supermarket. You can make it yourself. So I often talk about this. So excuse me for just loving this part. What I like to do, if you look at the picture on your left, which looks like some kind of a mess, right? And the picture on your right, these are vegetable pieces that in preparing the vegetable, perhaps the end of an onion, or smaller pieces, or extra garlic, or little pieces of carrots or peppers or something. Anything that's still edible. Don't put anything into your stock bag that's not edible, but put them all together in a 1-gallon Ziploc freezer bag. You could start with a quart-sized bag if you like. I often do, and then I outgrow it in about 2 weeks, and I need to use a larger bag. So if you start with a bigger bag, just start putting all these pieces in every time you're doing any kind of preparation where you have herbs or tomatoes or any kind of vegetables, except for a couple vegetables. Then you put those pieces into your bag and zip it up, seal it, keep it in the freezer. And then the next time you're cutting up veggies, you pull that bag out, add some more to it, back into the freezer. Even if you're just cutting up onion and garlic and you have a few extra pieces, put that into the bag. You can never have too much onion and garlic in that bag. What's good not to put into that bag is a lot of potatoes. They just don't work well in your stock so much. A little bit is okay, but try to avoid them for the most part, and avoid your cruciferous vegetables like your broccoli and cauliflower. A little bit in your freezer bag is just fine, but a lot of it is overwhelming, and it will overwhelm your stock and sort of change the taste of it. So just a little bit on that. But you can see, if you can look through the ice crystals here in the pictures, I have tomatoes, pieces of onion. It looks like some fresh parsley, maybe celery in the picture on the left, or on the right. On the left, I see some zucchini and some other greens. Looks like pieces of celery. It could be cabbage, some of that in there, not too much of it. That's like liquid gold to me in my freezer, because I save it up when the bag is full or pretty full. Then I take that bag and dump it into a large stock pot, cover the the frozen veggies with water, and cover them with maybe at least 2 inches additional water. Put the lid on, get it to a boil, put it to a simmer, and leave it simmer for about an hour and a half. Maybe you can do it in an hour, but I think an hour and a half works really just well. And you will find that those veggies will cook down to practically nothing. Okay, it'll kind of look like mush for the most part, which is okay. That means the nutrients have cooked out of the vegetable, the flavors have cooked out too, and you'll end up with a very nice stock. So I'm going to show you this quick video so you could see how easy it is to do this. And in this picture, this is a close-up picture I took in my kitchen of stock that I had just prepared. So you notice it has a color to it. Your color of your stock totally depends on the ingredients you had in your freezer bag. If you have some intense color, like tomato in there, it's going to be a little more amber red color like this. If you have carrots in there, the color will change depending on what you have put into your bag. And that's the fun part about the stock, because that changes the taste of it too. So let's see if we can get this video to play. Okay. Well, we don't want to take the attention away from the words there. This is important. Measure the stock into the amounts you're going to use. This will be very helpful down the road. So once you create your stock from whatever ingredients you have in it, I'll have to let that finish playing. You create that stock, um, and after it comes to that boil for an hour and a half, what I like to do is I'll need a second pot usually, and I'll have a colander ready so I can pour all the contents of the first pot that has the stock now and the veggies that are cooked, poured into a second pot where I can drain it and strain it, because I don't want onion peels ending up and other pieces of vegetables ending up into that stock. I'm not looking for a clarified stock. I'm just looking for something that doesn't have pieces in it, because I don't know what I'm going to do with it later down the road. So I kind of just like let that drain really good. And sometimes I even take a spoon, a big slotted spoon, and press against the sides of the colander to make sure I get every little bit out, because that stock is really like gold to me. I do put it in freezer bags, in quart-sized bags, in 2 cup amounts, 4 cup amounts, or whatever I think I'm going to need. For example, if I'm going to make most soups, I will probably need 4 cups of stock or 8 cups of stock. So, 4 cups in a bag is absolutely perfect. That works really good. But if I have smaller amounts, that's good too, because if I'm going to be cooking farro or rice, I can use my stock in that cooking, and I can retain those nutrients then in my whatever I'm cooking, my rice or my grain product. So if I have my cooked stock, I have it in the freezer. I feel like, well, today's a good soup day. Maybe I have some things on hand in the fridge, nice fresh veggies that I could use, or maybe some frozen ones. Then I get that itch to like, let's make something out of it. So I'll pull out some stock. I usually defrost it somewhat in the microwave oven for like a minute or two in the bag. And then I'll see if I can dump it into a bowl and let it defrost on its own, or I'll put it back into the microwave and get it to defrost a little bit more. But a good stock, or excuse me, a good soup starts very often with some veggies. Like here we have carrots, celery, onion, that to me are mostly a good start to a soup. I might want to add tomatoes. I could use canned tomatoes. I could use fresh tomatoes chopped up. I could use tomatoes that I grew in my garden or I bought at the farm market in the summer that I cut up and put into the freezer, and use them in my soup. But think about using the freshest ingredients you can, or ones that are frozen. The cooked vegetables that are in cans are very good too. They just don't need that cooking time too much. So shop for your ingredients. I mean, this is really the fun part. If you're a creative, confident cook, then you always know what you have, in your refrigerator, in your pantry, that you can pull on to put something together. Maybe you just need like an hour's time or an hour and a half's time. So shop at home first. What do you have? Do you have onion, garlic, celery? Do you keep that in your refrigerator? I often do. I always have onion, garlic, celery, red pepper, carrots in my refrigerator ready to go for anything, not knowing what I'm going to do with them. In my freezer, well, that's a little treasure trove of its own, because I like to save various ingredients like extra grilled corn that I made, or extra tomato something that I made, like a tomato sauce, extra pasta, extra rice, extra farro, maybe some roasted butternut squash that I had, and I have it in the freezer. So I look and see what's in the freezer. And very often I also have some bags that have like cooked chicken or cooked ham or pork or turkey that I can also pull out and put into a soup if I want. So think about this, what do you have on hand at any given time? Are you ready to kind of make up something if the urge gets you to say, hey, today's a good soup day? I'm always ready for that day. So if you make soup, if you make stock, you need to store it safely. we have a very hot product when we're making stock or we're making soup. We don't want to put it into the refrigerator or the freezer right away. We want it to cool somewhat, but not too much at room temperature. It'll take way too long to get to room temperature, and that's not really a safe way to do it anyway. Take your hot pot and you can kind of stir off the steam. If you stir that pot for a while, you'll notice lots of steam coming off. So giving it a good stir for maybe 5 minutes and then allow it to sit 15, 20 minutes, stir it again, let it sit 15, 20 minutes. Now it's probably cool enough to do something with. Either put it into smaller containers, take it out of your pot, maybe have some Tupperware or some glass bowls or something that you can put that soup in and separate it and put it into the refrigerator to cool a little bit more. Or you could put it into glass jars even and cool it there and put it into the refrigerator. You can store your stock or your soup in the refrigerator for 3 to 5 days. Some people stretch it, I know, a little bit longer, but that's what's considered safe. Or you can freeze it for 3 to 6 months. So if you're going to freeze your soup or your stock, you can do it if you like to in Ziploc freezer bags because they work kind of well to freeze them flat and then be able to stack them in the freezer. Or if you have containers that are freezer safe, that's really a good option too. But always label whatever you are freezing. You should label what you're refrigerating too, just in case somebody else comes along in the kitchen and doesn't know what something is. Label it and put a date on it. So you know when you put it in the freezer in terms of then when should you use it by. So once we've made a really wonderful soup, what do we do with it? How do we make this a meal? Soup in itself can be such a great meal, but if you pair it with some dark green leafy salad, it works really well because then you sort of have this hot, steamy soup and you have a nice, cool salad that's crunchy. They make a nice pair together. Maybe some whole grain bread is a good option to serve with your soup. It's really just a matter of taste, right? So let's talk about a soup that is very, very simple and very versatile. Now, when I was a kid, I have to admit, I did not like tomato soup because tomato soup in our house was Campbell's tomato soup. I just did not like it. Making my own tomato soup today is a very different story. It tastes very different. The stock I use that I've made to put into it helps to give it a richness, a rich flavor. I could also purchase a vegetable stock or broth at the supermarket too. I could use that. I just like to use my own. But once I have this tomato soup, I can stir in some things that are just kind of fun, like maybe some cooked chicken or turkey or ham, maybe some cooked pasta, maybe a couple of extra vegetables, maybe to stir in down the road. I know when our friends get together and I'm cooking soup, they like the stir-ins. It's really kind of fun. You can kind of make it your own. So let's see if we can get this to play. So this is a very, very simple tomato soup. So easy to do. You can start with tomatoes from your garden or tomatoes from a can or tomatoes in your freezer. Just need a few things: onions, garlic, some vegetable stock of your own, some tomatoes, and you do need some butter. I know it sounds like a lot, but tablespoons it's not, but this serves a lot of people. Start with butter, and you know you're going to be adding that onion and garlic right into that butter right off the bat. Give your soup that really rich kind of a base. Stir that just for about 5 minutes. Then you can add some garlic. The more the better. I like maybe 4 cloves, 5 cloves of garlic in this. And then your tomatoes. I'm using canned pureed tomatoes here. I can use pureed or chopped tomatoes. Add your stock. A little bit of salt. Yep, you need salt, but a tablespoon is not a lot of salt in this pot of food. And you can add some ground pepper. It's simple. You can dress it up later on. Just bring it to a boil. In 25 minutes, this soup has come together into a really beautiful combination. I like to use an immersion blender because I don't add cream or milk to tomato soup. I use an immersion blender that just blends it so nicely. It seems like it has cream in it. Freezes very well. That soup is so versatile. It freezes great. You can have it in the freezer for 6 months, maybe even more. You can serve it with lots of stir-ins as options. It's a great kind of warm you up or cool you down kind of soup because tomato soup is kind of simple. So it can be used in the base, down the road for other soups you might want to make. It's one of my favorites, and we get a lot of response from the tomato soup. This pumpkin and black bean soup is also a favorite, and I have made this in many hands-on soup classes in the past couple of years. What's so nice about the soup is it is super nutrient dense. It has black beans for protein. It has pumpkin, which is a superfood. It tastes wonderful. It's very, very satisfying and filling. So if you're saying, gee, I don't know if I like pumpkin in my soup, you really don't even know it's there. You wouldn't even taste it. So let's watch this one. Get it. Start with 2 cans of black beans and drain them, rinse them really well. You use a can of pumpkin puree. Make sure it's pure pumpkin puree. What you need is an onion, garlic, a little bit of butter, yep, not very much. Then get this in a large pan. Saute the onion and garlic. And add some cumin in here. This has a really nice taste to it, along with pepper and salt. Throw your seasonings in to the melted butter mixture. Like that better. A bit over 5 minutes just to get that blended a little bit. And then add tomato puree again out of a can or your freezer. And 4 cups of vegetable stock. Add that in there. Get it back to a boil. And I don't know if the sound is okay here. Add the pumpkin puree. You really will not taste the pumpkin in this, but this is superfood. This adds so much nutrients to your soup. Add the black beans in. Stir it in. Bring it to a boil. Let it simmer, and this soup will thicken so nicely in 25 minutes. You should stir it once in a while, and you can serve it as it is, or you can use the immersion blender and blend part of it or all of it, depending on how easy you like your soup. Sometimes I puree a lot, and sometimes I just give a quick puree, and sometimes I don't puree it at all. This is a very hearty, filling soup. This will be a meal in itself. Great also with dark green vegetable salad too. But it's a very hearty soup. It freezes really well. And everybody really seems to love that soup. So, what about chicken soup, right? We know chicken soup kind of soothes the soul, right? How about making it a quick and easy way that doesn't take a really long time? Okay. Some days, if it's a snowy day, hey, let me just play around the kitchen for 2 hours and it's no big deal. But some days you want to get dinner on the table a little bit more quickly. Although all of these soup recipes really take 45 minutes or less. But this one is probably even a little bit quicker. This is like a version of a chicken and veggie soup. And you'll notice I use some prepared products in this because they add flavor. Okay, you'll notice in this recipe, I used some uh, vegetable soup mix. It adds great flavor in a very quick way to your soup. So keep that on hand too. I use it very often in some of my soup. This recipe, I use lots of spinach, a bit of kale, and I have some cooked chicken. I have cooked pasta. So I have some of these things ready to go in the freezer, and I have some of them in the refrigerator. So I can put this together really quickly. The Lipton soup mix gives it all the flavor you need. You don't need to add any salt or anything like that. If you want to add some other seasonings later on, you can. This is where it pays to have a little bit of cooked peas, carrots, corn, or all of that in your freezer. And this is my ace in the hole ingredient. When my soup needs a little bit of something, I always have lots of pesto that I've made from the herbs in my garden. I have that in my freezer and add some of that, maybe 2 tablespoons, 3 tablespoons to a pot of soup. It just gives it the most wonderful flavor, very like fresh herb, spring-like taste to your soup. So that's kind of a nice thing to have on hand. And if you don't have your own pesto, then buy a jar of it and keep it in your refrigerator, and you may be able to use that interchangeably. It's the thing I do when my soup just needs a little something. And also, back to the tomato soup recipe, add a couple of tablespoons of your prepared pesto to that in the end. And oh my goodness, it's just absolutely delicious. It makes for a wonderful soup. This is another soup recipe that people really seem to like. And I see it as a very nutritious soup because it has lots of red lentils in it, like a pound of red lentils, and it has roasted butternut squash in it. So the texture comes out wonderful. It's very, very hearty. I apologize if you hear noise in the background. We're having a little bit of contracting work done here today. Probably not the best day for that, right? Let's see if we can get this. That could be pumpkin. Okay, again, one of the recipes that we've used in our in-person soup classes is very popular. It's a very hearty soup, freezes really well, makes a really great meal, and it is just packed with nutrients. Certainly worth your time. Okay, so let's see how we can wrap this up. Um, you need to be creative with your cooking, hopefully. And if you've been cooking for a while, you have that confidence to do so. And you need to have some fun with it too, be like a little bit adventurous. So um, start with fresh, frozen, or canned vegetables, or a combination of them. That's okay. Whatever works for you. Think about adding some superfoods. And I put tomatoes, carrots here. Pumpkin is a superfood. These foods are have lots of nutrients in them. So you're really kind of loading that soup up with lots of nutrients. Start with a good stock or broth. Now, if you want to make it, great. If you say, hey, I can't do that, great, that's fine too. But if you make it yourself, you don't nowhere in the recipe do we add salt to a stock. We don't need to. It's flavorful enough without any sodium at all. So if you're looking for a low sodium version, making your own is probably the best way to go. You will find some lower sodium, reduced sodium versions in the supermarket. Think about adding a protein, which could be one of my personal favorites is farro, barley, or a high protein pasta to add some protein to your soup. You could also add meat of some kind to your soup to add some protein. And when you're making soup, I mean, it's inevitable. You're going to make enough that you're going to have some left over, which is great, right? There's the bonus. That's lunch the next day or dinner the next day, or you can freeze it and have it, on a day when you just don't have time to do any food preparation. So think about how you can freeze some, enough for you, enough for your family, so that you have it as a quick meal on another day. Save these small amounts of leftover cooked vegetables or pastas or meat in your freezer, because when you go to make your soup, these are the items that are going to jump out at you, that you're going to say, hey, that would be great in that soup today, and you can kind of pull them together. Also, if you are purchasing a ready-made soup at a market or something, and you think, gee, it just doesn't have enough of something in it. If you have these small amounts of veggies or meat in your freezer, you can always add something and kind of perk it up yourself. Don't be afraid to experiment. I think that's the most fun when it comes to making soup. It doesn't have to be a hard science. Make it your science, what works for you. Find the ingredients that work the best for you. Try something new all the time to kind of expand it and see what makes it really fun. Okay, so now how do we take this away with us? And we very often talk about, diet and lifestyle. We want everybody to have a healthy lifestyle and a healthy diet. So we're talking about, doesn't have to be plant-based, although that's a great idea, but mostly fruits and vegetables in our diet. We want legumes or whole grains that are very good for you. and we want to use seafood whenever possible and low-fat meat if we're going to be using it. Nuts and seeds are great in your diet. It's always great to socialize. We find that in the healthiest parts of the world, the people that live the longest and are very healthy get together with friends and family for meals, perhaps every time, once a week, a couple times a week, that it's a chance to have some conversation, share information, and it helps you to enjoy your meal a little bit more. Be active every day. Make sure you get enough sleep and rest, because if you don't have enough sleep and rest, you're going to start your day in sort of a little bit of an anxious state, a restless state, and your day will probably not go well. So focus on getting enough rest, drink water, make it your beverage of choice, and take care of you, because you can't take care of everybody else in your life if you don't take care of yourself first. Find your time in your day, your few minutes of me time. And maybe cooking is your me time.